Callum, it's time to introduce you to your new crush.
Go on.
Canadian Club Lemon Crush.
Of course, the taste buds have been screaming for a change.
And Canadian Club Lemon Crush is listening, with its balance of lemony zest and the smooth taste of Canadian Club.
Right now, there are 2,500 six-packs to be won. Scan your can or enter online for a chance. And always drink responsibly.
Canadian Club Lemon Crush. This zesty refreshment is your new crush.
Welcome back to another episode of SugarMamma's Fireplay. I am your host, financial planner Canna Campbell, and today's episode is one that I'm particularly passionate about. It's actually inspired by a segment that I did the other morning on the Today Show, where we discussed what happens when your body starts to give out physically before you're actually eligible for the age pension, something that is sadly becoming far too common for Australians in physically demanding jobs, especially as the age pension age is now 67 for all Australians. Now, this isn't actually just a financial issue. It's a health, lifestyle, and security issue. So today, we're going to break through this problem with care, clarity, and of course, at all times, compassion. But more importantly, I want to give you some options, some ideas, some practical strategies that are going to help you protect yourself and of course, your financial future. Because as we all know, prevention is always better than cure. All right, the harsh reality of physically demanding work. We've got to accept the reality of this, the truth. Even though it's at times uncomfortable to accept, most Australians work incredibly hard. But for tradespeople, labourers, aged care workers, nurses, disability support staff, this is a different type of hard. It is a physical hard workload where these people give their bodies, their time, and their energy. But the problem is when the body says, I actually can't do this anymore. I hurt too much. I'm aching too much. My back's gone. My knee's gone. But the problem is you're actually years away from being able to access the government's age pension. Now, the age pension age actually rose to 67. And more people are discovering that they're actually caught out in a really painful gap where they are not old enough to actually qualify for this government support. That is, they're not age 67 yet, but they also can't actually access their superannuation. But they are physically unable to keep working because they need their income to keep paying the bills. I have heard this from so many people. My back's gone. I'm in constant pain. I simply can't do another 8 years of this. I even read in the paper about a construction worker who said he's most likely going to die with his boots on. And what makes this even harder is that many people are actually in this position, haven't actually built enough superannuation to support themselves to have an early retirement, let alone have invested elsewhere for financial freedom and security. And this leads to people then having to scrape by on JobSeeker, which is paid at an absolute maximum level of $740 per fortnight, or instead having to use up what savings they may have built up over time. But then, of course, that then leaves them feeling like they're going backwards financially, which for some is actually a very accurate description. Now, not only is this heartbreaking, it is to a certain degree preventable, which is what I want to lovingly urge anyone who is in a physically demanding job to start preparing now. Even if you're only in your early 20s and you're feeling fit and strong, I want you to start thinking about a safety net and start building that safety net, because our bodies are not machines and nothing in life is guaranteed or even sustainable these days. So please make sure that you listen to this and you take action today, but you also share this wisdom with anyone else that you know that is in a physically demanding job that they know they can't do forever. So let's move on to the practical steps. So emergency planning, that protective buffer. Now, one of the best tools for your financial toolkit is your emergency fund. I'm always talking about how important this is. If your body gave out tomorrow, would you have 3 to 6 months to live off for living expenses? This is not a savings fund that you've got to, set aside for, say, a new holiday or a new car or, buying a new laptop or outfit. This is your shit gets real account. What if everything stops? What if I can't physically work? It's not just a buffer. It's to help you stay afloat until you can swim or paddle or doggy paddle yourself. It buys you time. It gives you the space to heal again. It also helps keep your dignity whilst you figure out what your next move is. I've never had someone say to me that they regret having emergency money. Now, a common question is exactly how much do you really need? Okay, you need a lot more than you probably think, particularly if you're in a physically demanding job and burnout physically is real. I recommend you spend some time thinking about how much money and time you would need and like in order to be able to take a break for your body. And then I would go north of that particular figure. Now, this may sound unrealistic when you do the numbers, but don't let that stop you. You could start with building up an emergency fund of, say, $1,000 as a mini goal. And the moment you hit that, you then make it the next goal $1,500, and then $2,300, and then $3,000, and then $5,500, and keep building it from there, adding as often as you possibly can, and of course, reviewing and tracking it on a regular basis. You need to look at your own situation. There is no magical formula to work out the right amount of emergency money. I know I've used the example of, say, 6 to 12 months, but that's actually not necessarily sufficient or appropriate for absolutely everyone. You need to look at your responsibilities, such as mortgage repayments or children or other financial dependents. Look at the finer details of your situation and what you really want rather than a generic formula that's going to be potentially misleading. Now, of course, you can think about the other protection safety nets that you have in place, like you might have, a large amount of annual leave accumulated, or you may have a lot of sick leave accumulated, or you already may have income protection. Of course, that can come off that top line figure, but make sure you actually stop and think about these numbers in a mindful way and really think about what makes you feel safe and secure. Now, this emergency money should sit in a separate savings account away from your normal everyday spending account. So there's no temptation to dip into it. If you have a mortgage, you could consider using an offset account or a redraw facility so that at least it's helping you save, obviously, time and interest. But promise me, you won't ever touch it unless you really do need it. And even if you do have to touch it for a short period of time, make sure you top it up as quickly as you possibly can. This money, this emergency money, is one of the most empowering things that you can do for your future self, and it creates an incredible sense of peace of mind that is going to also protect your mental load when you know that the risk of being injured or burnout or just physically not being able to keep up anymore is real. The next thing I want to talk to you about is diversifying your skills. Thinking about an exit ramp, you could call it. Now, a lot of people call this upskilling or diversifying your skill set, and I'm not talking about this to make you put pressure on your life and question your career path, but I want you to make sure that you always feel safe and secure, but you also know that you're actually flexible and that you can pivot fluidly if your job becomes physically unsustainable. So I would recommend you start thinking about this, and you might like to ask yourself this one question. If I couldn't do this job tomorrow, what else could I do? Or even better, what else would I like to do? Start thinking about this. Write them down, start having conversations with friends, with family members. Could you perhaps transition to something less physical, maybe working part-time as a site coordinator or a supervisor, or become a teacher or a consultant or an advisor? Or could you maybe pivot and diversify into maybe recruitment for that particular industry? Could you move into admin or scheduling or maybe safety compliance or, some form of training role in your industry? Or perhaps you just want to get out of the industry completely, or maybe even a different location, like an office or a classroom. Perhaps you can keep working the same job, but you maybe need less hours, so you give your body more time to actually rest and recharge. Or perhaps you need to just change the hours with your existing job further down the track as your body wears out. Maybe the early morning starts are no longer right for you, or perhaps you actually need to finish up earlier in the day. Think about your career and how you can pivot, and how you can also do this in a very flexible manner so that you're never left shocked or bewildered by a sudden change. And perhaps you may think about pivoting completely as you think your body might wear out. What communication skills do you have that you can build upon? Do you have leadership skills? logistics skills, or maybe even a bit of a tech insight that could be of value to other industries. Even just spending like 1 hour a week learning something new, doing it like an online course or a workshop, or even simply shadowing someone can really pay dividends down the track. And in fact, you actually never know where this may take you, and it actually could be the start of an amazing new exciting career, and perhaps even start this amazing new career path a lot earlier than you actually realize, because perhaps you discover something, you know what, I don't need to wait until my body falls apart. Why don't I get out now before my body does fall apart? You see, it's really about investing in yourself now by exploring, your future career options that are going to give you far greater flexibility today or even later in life. And at the end of the day, that's what real financial independence is about. Choices and options, not just numbers in your bank account, or even better, in your share portfolio. Next, I want to talk about insurances. And of course, this is a real practical safety net. And I feel like I don't talk about insurances enough, but we're going to do this right now. So I'm not talking general insurances like car insurance and home and contents insurance. I'm talking about personal insurance. They're not sexy, but they are most definitely life-saving. The sooner you can take them out, the better, because you don't run the risk of loadings and exclusions when your health situation has changed or you've had, say, an injury. Now, if you're in a physically demanding job or you're self-employed like myself, you're going to need to be across 3 types of cover as an absolute minimum. Obviously, there is life cover, but I don't want to necessarily talk about this in this particular episode right now. So the first one that you need to know about, and I think this is one of the most important insurances, everybody should have this as a non-negotiable. In fact, I wish the government made this compulsory, but income protection pays you a monthly benefit, which is typically around 75% of your income if you are unable to work due to an illness or an injury. And that illness or injury doesn't necessarily need to be linked to the workplace. This is separate to work cover. So say, for example, you're on the weekend and your back, which is already sore from working long shifts or being on your feet, you slip somewhere or you fall or something happens while you're at home. And say your back completely goes, or you need some sort of surgery to recover, and you simply cannot wait to take 6 months off work. You can't, it's not physically possible because you need to keep, the bills paid, food on the table, and so forth. Now, this is where income protection comes in and kicks in. And it would pay you after a waiting period, of course, which is either, 30, 60, 90, 180 days, whatever it may be in your policy. But that policy would kick in and pay you up to 75% of your income until you could go back to work, which would allow you to have that surgery or to take that time off to allow your body to rest and recover, to go to those physio appointments or see that specialist so that you can get back into the workforce at an appropriate speed without feeling stress and pressure of the bills piling up. Of course, it goes without saying, always obviously get advice, particularly if you're on a tight budget, because this can be owned and paid for in different ways to help you so that you at least have something in force rather than nothing at all. But as I've said, this is an absolute non-negotiable. Everyone should have income protection. The next insurance I want to talk to you about, and it's the second most important insurance, and that is trauma insurance, also known as critical illness. Now, this policy pays a lump sum if you're diagnosed with a major illness like a cancer or stroke, or you suffer a heart attack. This isn't so much about replacing your income. It's paid out as a lump sum, typically tax-free. And it's designed to take away the financial stress out of recovery and rehabilitation. I know people personally who have cancer and they're doing treatment and they're paying for that treatment, but they actually don't want to take time off away from work because it's a great distraction for them and they're trying to just keep a normal routine. Trauma cover pays out that lump sum. So it could help pay off the mortgage or help pay for all those bills or allow you to, say, cut down to, say, part-time work as you're going through treatment. Yes, I have this cover. I think I have about close to $600,000 worth of trauma cover. Not advice, but just to show you how serious I am about this, I follow my own advice. So it's worth looking into trauma cover as a second insurance policy. Then, of course, there's TPD, total and permanent disablement. This pays out, again, a lump sum if you can't work again in your particular occupation due to a permanent condition. Now, there are different types of definitions, so you've got to go and get advice, whether it's own occupation or any occupation. So this is really important because it could be the result of you getting a payout or it actually being declined. And again, this is designed to help pay off debt, medical expenses, and obviously fund your lifestyle. And yes, it can be at times structured through superannuation, but you have to get advice because you want to make sure that that payment, if it is paid out and you make a claim, that you can actually access it and it's not stuck within super. Now, many Australians have some form of insurance, that is personal insurance, already inside their super. So it's always worth checking. But quite often, the insurance that they have, if they have it at all, isn't nearly enough. And it is definitely not tailored to what they actually need. So I can't stress this enough. Speak to a financial planner and get them to review what you already have in place and help work out what's missing so you can figure out how to bridge that gap or plug a hole in that potential risk bucket for you. And a financial planner is going to know exactly which insurance companies are actually best to work with for your particular type of manual work. Yes, in the past, insurance companies used to be really strict with certain people in certain, physically demanding jobs. And some of them would even be an automatic decline. They couldn't even apply for cover in the first place. But insurance companies have really evolved since those times and are very different. In fact, my partner, Tom, he's a equine physio. So he is around horses all day. His job is incredibly physically demanding. And there is obviously the risk that a horse, which can weigh up to 500 kilos, could land on him and injure him or something even more serious. Now, an insurance company looked at his application. They had a phone call with him to understand his job, ask all the right questions, and they actually insured him. And I think he was one of a very few equine physios that was actually insured. And that was probably, 5 or 6 years, or 6 years ago, actually.
Sam, it's time for me to introduce you to your new crush.
Go on.
Canadian Club Lemon Crush.
Of course, the taste buds have been screaming for a change.
And Canadian Club Lemon Crush is listening, with its balance of lemony zest and the smooth taste of Canadian Club.
Right now, there are 2,500 six-packs to be won. Scan your can or enter online for a chance, and always drink responsibly.
Canadian Club Lemon Crush. This zesty refreshment is your new crush.
All right, the next thing is probably the biggest one, which is applicable to everyone, actually, even regardless of whether you have a physically demanding job or not, and that is to invest whilst you can. Build that passive income. So, as you know, passive income is the ultimate form of financial protection. When you've got a passive income coming in to you through investing, it can cover your living expenses or at least help cover your living expenses. And when you have enough passive income that more than covers your living expenses, there is less of a need for insurances and emergency money because you've always got that passive income covering your living expenses regardless or not. It doesn't mean that emergency money or personal insurances aren't needed at all, but there's maybe less of a need, or perhaps you don't need as much cover, or you can look at saving some money there. So this is the power of passive income in that, complete holistic, financial protection and freedom. So if you can start putting your money to work for you, so that your body doesn't always have to rely on earning money, you are going to be in such a stronger position. And the sooner you start investing, the more time you're going to give your investments to grow and actually realistically give that passive income a chance to actually compound and grow over time. So here's what I actually recommend to everyone, especially though if you're in a physically demanding job. Understand that your body earns now. Your money earns later. If you cannot invest on a consistent basis, even small amounts, you are seriously setting yourself up for the option to be able to, further down the track when appropriate, reduce those hours, change careers, or perhaps if you're really passionate and dedicated and patient, retire on your own terms. Now, obviously, this is not product advice or investment advice, but shares and property are my two favorite ways to build wealth and, of course, that passive income. And I love dividend paying shares, and I love the long-term capital growth that comes from investments such as ETFs or in particular listed investment companies. But think about building a positively geared investment portfolio where your income, whether it be dividends or rent or even interest off a savings account, can help contribute or even cover your living expenses over time. Now, this is what's going to help you build a growing, reliable income stream that isn't actually dependent on your physical health and well-being. Imagine if you had $500 a month coming in from, say, your investment portfolio. That could help cover the bills if you're unable to work. Perhaps that means you can work one less day, or perhaps you can work half a day instead of a whole day. Or perhaps it means you can actually say no to those physically straining jobs that are really taxing on your body. Or perhaps it's that $500 a month that your investment portfolio pays you can actually help bridge an earlier retirement or even a career change. You don't need large amounts of money to get started. You just simply need to get started. Even $50 a week into, say, a diversified investment, like a listed investment company or an ETF, can seriously add up to tens of thousands of dollars over time, particularly if you can automatically reinvest all of your dividends back into your investment portfolio. And of course, there are lots of different things you can do to really help drive your portfolio in a very efficient way, which is why you should go and listen to all my other podcast episodes. And of course, whilst you're working and you get pay rises or bonuses or tax refunds or any other financial windfall, if you can afford to, why don't you think about putting it back into that investment portfolio so you're creating even a greater sense of financial protection in your life and prioritizing your body and the reality that our bodies can't always keep going at this pace. So trust me on this, investing is essential. Your future self will most definitely thank you. And of course, always track your passive income and get excited as you watch it grow. It really boils down to you getting started today. All right, the next part I want to talk to you about is alternative options if you can't actually keep working. So if you are finding that you are already struggling and you can't actually keep working anymore, but you're not 67 and you've kind of maybe missed that boat of investing or building up emergency money because reality is only sort of hitting you now, there are definitely a few different options that you can explore. So of course, you could look at early access to your superannuation. And this might be through compassionate grounds, financial hardship, or if you've been able to meet a definition of, permanent incapacity, which needs 2 independent doctors to actually write you a medical certificate for. But I will say this, if early access to super is something that you're looking at, please know that it is complex, it is lengthy, and it is very limited. You may have $3 million, for example, in superannuation, and you think, I'll just get all that money out under early access. That's not necessarily the case. You may only get a fraction of that, even if you're lucky. But you also need to keep in mind, if you are going to rely on your super under early access, to a certain degree, you're actually robbing your future self of your financial well-being because you're taking money out of something that's supposed to be growing for you to support you well into your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. So act with a very conservative strategy. And obviously, of course, get advice if you're going down that path. The other option, obviously, is look into income protection and TPD claims. You should check to see if you have any superannuation accounts that you're not aware of, perhaps, jumping on the government website and having a search, because then you never know. There may actually be an income protection policy attached to one of your old superannuation accounts that you're not aware of. And of course, check the TPD cover as well. You may actually be insured and you may be entitled to that money. And then, of course, there's things like downsizing your home. If you are fortunate enough to own a home, you may be in a position where it's time to consider downsizing so that you're mortgage free or you have a much smaller mortgage and you don't need to earn as much money to service that mortgage and, of course, pay it off over time. Another option for some people who can't downsize, but they've, for example, paid their mortgage off, and they may want to look at getting advice around a reverse mortgage. And that's obviously for people who are over the age of 60 and, of course, have plenty of home equity. And another option might be something like a transition to retirement strategy, where once you reach a preservation age, which is normally around age 60 for most of us, you might be able to reduce your working hours and actually draw some of your superannuation through an allocated pension. Now, of course, there are a lot of fine details around each of these different ideas and strategies, which is why it's so important that you go and speak to a financial planner before you make any major decisions or make any big moves with your money. Now, as I wrap up today's episode, I want to remind you that this is not about panicking. It's about being proactive and creating a sense of protection for yourself and for your loved ones. I don't want to scare you. I want to empower you. Whether you realize it or not, your body is your greatest tool, whether you're using your legs, your arms, your back, or even your brain. So when it comes to your income source, we've got to make sure that we look after it if it's paying those bills. Planning now is not about negative thinking or manifesting something disastrous. It's about being real. It's about being respectful. It's about being wise and sensible and financially intelligent. And of course, coming from a place of self-love and compassion. If you're 35 years old, earning, say, $100,000 a year, and you plan on retiring at age, say, 65, you've got 30 years of work ahead of you, that's over $3 million that you're going to be earning over the next 30 years. And that's assuming no pay rises at all. So it's probably going to be in excess of $3 million. So if you or someone you know is in a physically demanding job, can I please encourage you to start an emergency fund? Go and get some advice on personal insurance. Look at diversifying your skills and contemplating what other career paths you would like to adventure down. And of course, start investing. Start building that passive income stream. As I said, that extra $500 a month can make a big difference between barely hanging in there and actually being in control with your head above water. And of course, most importantly, advocate yourself. Ask the questions and take action today. You deserve financial freedom. I'm really serious about that. And not just one day, someday, but right now, today. And you deserve to have that peace of mind and a practical plan in place for yourself. Now, if you found this episode helpful, can you do me a huge favor, please? Can you send it to your friends, your family members, co-workers, anyone you know that needs to hear this? And when I say physically demanding, I also want to make sure that we include the people who do mentally exhausting work as well as the physical work. So we're all going to look out for each other, give each other this insight, this advice, these words of wisdom so that we become more financially resilient. Or whatever, everyone, thank you so much for listening to today's episode on SugarMamma's Fireplay. Until next time, keep that financial fire burning bright.
Sam, it's time for me to introduce you to your new crush.
Go on.
Canadian Club Lemon Crush.
Of course, the taste buds have been screaming for a change.
And Canadian Club Lemon Crush is listening, with its balance of lemony zest and the smooth taste of Canadian Club.
Right now, there are 2,500 six-packs to be won. Scan your can or enter online for a chance, and always drink responsibly.
Canadian Club Lemon Crush. This zesty refreshment is your new crush.